Welcome to the Dementia Masterclass Party Pack. Get 6 guests for the price of 1. Woohoo! Today we are talking with the International Caregivers Association. We've got Dr. Lord, Dr. Stelter, Dr. Harrison. Is there a doctor in the house? We've got 3. And Bill, Pat, Ryan, and me. Yes, this is 2.5 freaking hours, but it is action-packed and, I must say, a quite handy guide to dementia and dementia care. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to ICA! Okay, so I have the International Caregivers Association here. This is a whole new ballgame for me. One, this is a live event. I'm recording this live. There might be audience members in here. And even bigger, there are 6 people I'm interviewing right now. So this is a bit of a new adventure for me, which I'm excited about. But also forgive me if I slip up here and there. It a bit reminds me of when I was a kid and I had 10 brothers and sisters, and we're all just talking over each other. So I will enjoy editing this one. The topic today is dementia and dementia care. So I'm going to ask questions, and since there are 6 of you, whoever feels most comfortable answering the question, just answer it. I could play teacher and be like, okay, Bill, what do you think? Okay, Ryan, what do you think? That's fine, but I don't know. I don't know you guys well enough to know who knows what. So just answer it. It's fine if you happen to interrupt each other, or if someone answers but you also want to answer the question, go right ahead. I'm happy to stay here all day, but we probably got a limited amount of time. The first question is very, very basic. What is dementia? For you, it's probably quite obvious, but it's one of these terms like cancer or technology or something, where it's a huge umbrella term within umbrella terms like neurodegeneration. What is dementia?
Well, I would like to take that question and then pass it over to Dr. Stelter. Dementia is, like you said, a big umbrella that covers a lot of areas. It's basically memory loss. There could be a lot of conditions causing dementia. I like to define dementia as all dimensions. That's my definition. I'll pass it on right now to Dr. Stelter to say a little bit more.
Absolutely. So to complement what you're saying, Dr. Lord, it is a loss of mental functioning, and that's very general because there are many different kind of forms or types that can create this loss of mental functioning. We use the term dementia so readily in our industry, and we'll use it today because that's the term people know. But the reality is the actual diagnosis is called neurocognitive disorder, and it can span from mild to major, depending on where the person is at in the spectrum. So that's really the technical diagnosis, but we often say people have dementia. And then when I am interacting with, whether it be caregivers or care partners, and they'll say, my mother has dementia, I'll say, well, what type? And unfortunately, oftentimes they don't know. And so I think that branches us into this realm of how can we better understand dementia? How can we better work with and care for and treat the disease itself? And where does our industry need to go with this?
So from my understanding, there's a sort of big umbrella term like neurodegeneration, and that includes things like Parkinson's and ALS, Huntington's disease, and all this. And then we have dementia, and there are these 4 or 5 main kind of most common types of dementia, Alzheimer's being the main one. And then we have frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body disease, vascular dementia, mixed dementia. And there are like hundreds of more, but 95% of them are these 5 that I mentioned, from what I understand. What are the different types of dementia? And how, this is a huge topic, but what are some of the differences between each of these types? That's a podcast in itself, but go ahead.
I can answer that. So you're right, Michael. I mean, there's over 100 different types of dementias, and we continue to learn more every day about other dementias that are coming out. The most recent we've learned, of course, is COVID and the effects how COVID has on our brain and our body. And so when we look at the most common forms, Alzheimer's being the most common, The difference between that and a lot of other dementias is that this one is particular to development of protein deposits in the brain. And these protein deposits are formed by plaques and tangles. And think of them as like conglomerates of these protein deposits that form together. And what's supposed to happen is, because you and I, we form protein deposits, unfortunately, everyone does, because we're exposed to the world and we experience life, but ours break up. Okay. And in people living with Alzheimer's disease, theirs don't break up. It stays together. And what happens is, as that clump is forming together, it unfortunately deteriorates that part of the brain. And then another clump forms and deteriorates that part of the brain. It keeps moving throughout the brain, where a lot of the various parts of the brain become impacted. And we have to remember that each part of our brain has a very important skill set that allows us to function, whether it's how we're thinking or how we're behaving, how we take care of ourselves, how we communicate to other people, how we learn information. And when our brain is unfortunately being taken over by these protein deposits, then, our skill sets deteriorate over time. That's kind of the mainstay of Alzheimer's disease. Different from another more common form that we're seeing up and coming is frontotemporal dementia. And here what's happening is there's a lot of damage to the frontal area here in our prefrontal cortex. And in that area of our brain, we have beautiful skills called executive functioning skills. This allows us to plan and organize, being able to remember certain appointments, being able to think and have good judgment, good insight. And unfortunately, those skills are what keep us independent. And people living with frontotemporal dementia, they lose those skills very quickly in becoming independent or staying independent. And so what we see here is not only do we see a shift in their ability to take care of themselves independently, but we also see problems with behavioral challenges and things like that go along with the disease. Now, mixed dementia is really a combination of various different forms of dementia. That's what it is. So someone can have Alzheimer's disease and Lewy bodies, or they can have frontotemporal and Alzheimer's disease at the same time. And we're starting to see more and more mixed dementias as well. So I'll pass it on to somebody else, but those are kind of some of the key indicators of differences of the most common forms that we see.
Thank you, Dr. Stelter. I think that's a very good explanation. And it does become a mixed bag at the end because we get older. My husband had vascular dementia. He also had frontal lobe. So, and he started with Alzheimer's. So I think it's a medical issue as well. It's hard to detect what it is exactly. It takes years to do the right examination and also to give the right diagnosis. But that's a problem all over the world.
Okay, so it's basically these nerve cells are dying, and when that happens, there might be some amyloid plaque or some other indicator that that's happening. But what differentiates these is sort of which region of the brain the nerves are dying in, say the frontal lobes versus the temporal lobe or the parietal occipital lobes. And each of these parts of the brain has different functions. Say the frontal lobes will, the prefrontal cortex will help us with executive functioning, with social inhibition, controlling our behavior, etc. And then on and on. I'm not going to mention every part of the brain, but is it fair to say that the basic thing that is shared between all these dementias is this sort of death of these nerve cells, or this dysfunction of the nerve cells, and what differentiates each of them is which region of the brain is affected?
Yes,
Absolutely.
That's exactly right. And I'll pass it on to Dr. Stelter, but that's exactly right. And that's the best way to tell what kind of dementia is happening, because we can see the change in behaviors and the limitations that person is experiencing. Dr. Stelter?
Yeah, so through great research, what we found is that we can kind of categorize dementias into two types. There's cortical dementias and subcortical dementias. So cortical, kind of think of the outer part of our brain per se. Subcortical is kind of the inner parts of our brain, right? And so typical dementias like Alzheimer's disease, where we see that the individual loses their memory first, or cognitive abilities first, and then their physical function later. That's a lot of the cortical dementias. The precortical or the subcortical dementias are those where we see more physical problems first and then cognitive problems later. That's like your Parkinson's disease. So if you can identify where the dementia is in the brain, you can pretty much identify what that flow of that progression is going to look like.
Thank you.
How do we detect which part of the brain it's in? I know we can see their behaviors, change in
Yes.
behavior, but I'm guessing there's neuroimaging or there are biomarker tests you could do, or what's available for this?
Well, ideally, PET scans are going to be the most telling. They allow the imaging of the brain where we can see where it is in the brain, how far progressed it is, and being able to look at the overall just kind of damage that's done to the brain. So unfortunately, with a lot of insurances, they don't allow for PET scans right away. They kind of have to go through a succession where you might get a MRI first, and then it might move to eventually a PET scan. So I think you have to kind of play the system with the insurance. But we have been able to take the imaging to another level over the last 10 years, which is absolutely amazing. So PET scans would be the most telling for the individual.
And of course, Michael, we all know, and we've all heard this, that a true dementia is only determined after death, after they examine the brain.
Yeah, and we kind of have to understand this because basically what we want to get to today is the main takeaways are going to be how can we better care for people with dementia. So we need to know what type of dementia they have, what's going on in their individual brain, and also for people who don't have dementia yet, we want to be able to postpone that happening or maybe prevent it altogether. So yeah, that's why I'm asking these questions. What are some of the candidates as causes for dementia? And I know dementia is its general umbrella term once again, but yeah, dementia.
Well, there's several factors. First of all, we know lifestyle is very important. The way they live, the way they eat, the way they sleep is very important. We'll talk about that in a little bit, about sleep. There is no cure for dementia. There is no cure for Alzheimer's. And so let's face it, I would like to see more money spent in management, as we do at the ICA, to raise awareness and improve the life of those people, those individuals. We have over 55 million people right now in the world living with dementia. In the United States here, we have 6.7 million people. I'm concerned about the quality of life. I know there's no cure, so I'm not looking at that. Dr. Stelter has a different specialty, so that's why I'm referring to her for a lot of the answers today, including education. So that is my concern, is how well can they live and what should we do? How do you speak? How do you communicate with these people when they can no longer speak? We teach that. We can teach you that. That's the sort of thing we do. Bill, do you have something to add?
I think your listeners would find it very interesting, Michael, they may be thinking that dementia is an old person's disease, and of course it is primarily, but early onset dementia is a very real occurrence, and we're seeing very disturbing data that early onset dementia is increasing. And one of the things that we want to do here today is sound the clarion call that dementia is shaping up to be the primary healthcare crisis of the next 25 years. And so that's really what's fueling ICA to get out there and get on the very high impact channels like yours and to get the message out. For every person who suffers with dementia, there's about 10 or 12 other people who are directly impacted, family, caregivers, and so forth. So it's a massive societal issue. And your questions are very germane about what causes it. There's a lot of causes. I'm not a therapeutic expert, but I did want to make the point that this is something that touches. If you do a poll of families, it's touched virtually everybody you talk to.
Yes. I'd like Ryan to take over because I mentioned sleep, which is so important. Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, so Michael, that was actually a great question. You got into the causative factors of dementia, and please, Dr. Stelter, if I missed some, please correct me if I missed something. The ones that I'm aware of are genetic predisposition. So if individuals in your family have had histories of dementia, you might be likely to also inherit that symptom. Cardiovascular dysfunction. So if your heart is starting to break down or you're having atherosclerosis or artery disease, basically diseases associated with getting resources up to the brain so your brain can function, that puts you at increased risk of dementia. Any sort of TBI or adverse childhood experience, so trauma, that is something that also predisposes you to developing dementia later on in life. So generally, a good way to think about what causes dementia, or one of the major causes, is stress. So the way that I get into stress is, in order to truly appreciate sleep, you have to be able to quantify on a baseline level the different stressors that an individual perceives, but also biologically takes on, even if they don't perceive them. So sleep deprivation is definitely a major cause of dementia as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Stelter, because I'm sure I missed one or two interesting discussion points.
No, I just want to add too, I mean, age, we can't control that we're all getting older. And so age is the number one risk factor. And after age 85, about 50% of individuals will develop some form of dementia. So it is very much, as Bill said, the next, crisis, if you will, or pandemic, or however we want to, epidemic, however we want to label it, right? It's something that we all have to be willing to educate ourselves on, because I know still, in talking to and interacting with the general public, they have this fear that they're going to catch it, right? I can't tell you how many conferences I'm at, and at my booth, people don't come near me because they don't want to get dementia, right? And that's just not how it works. But age is the number one risk factor for that. But, to add to everyone else's risk factors, right on, so.
Yes, recently I had somebody call me because her sister-in-law, her brother, or her husband, they were sleeping together, and he has dementia, he has Alzheimer's, and she was asking me, can my sister catch that by sleeping with him? I heard that you could catch it if you sleep together. You don't.
So basically, any form of injury to the brain, it could be an acute one, like from traumatic brain injury, but it could be this sort of ongoing damage caused from other mental health disorders, like people with bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. This is also kind of overexciting the neurons or damaging them in ways. Stress, not getting sleep, so you're not getting the repair at night. The basic point seems to be damage to the neurons in whatever way is leading to this. And it could be a one big event. You could just fall and hit your head, or have a stroke, or whatever, or it could just be this sort of chronic stress going on, or chronic eating the wrong things or something. Talk about nutrition as well. I promise we will get to like caregiving and all that good stuff, but I kind of want to dig into this a little bit more first. Nutrition.
Yes, nutrition. There is so much available. In the 21 years that I took care of my husband, I discovered so many things, like Bacopa for the brain. For example, now we have Resilient that addresses mitochondria. And I replaced 12 medications with 12 nutritional supplements for my husband, including replacing anti-anxiety and depression medication, and everything that he had on his menu I replaced with, and he lived for 21 years very well and a good quality of life. So that's what's the most important at the moment. And I'd like to pass it on to Bill to add something else.
Well, I think that there is a lot of research emerging that is extremely exciting and interesting. It's almost as though other arms of science are accelerating to kind of come up and give us some answers and some insights. Dr. Lord mentioned mitochondria, which is, the powerhouse of the cell and so forth. Well, one of the pathologies leading to dementia is low brain energy. So there are, for example, Resilient is a product we're looking at and very interested in, and actually making available to our constituency because it specifically stimulates mitochondria and energy production in the brain. So yes, nutrition is going to increasingly be fundamental and foundational to good brain health. And I think a lot of the general public is aware of that. I'm not sure they're aware of the fact that there are some emerging technologies that are going to help accelerate that.
Yes, thank you.
And if I can add to that too, the Mediterranean diet has been studied extensively for our brain health. And, it also, to Dr. Lord's point, it has also showed significant effects with our depression and our anxiety as well. But it really does help with those cognitive processes. And so you're talking about foods that are, like your leafy greens, your legumes, your nuts, foods that are high in omega-3 fatty acids, some of the more nutritious fishes and things like that, with a less focus on red meat and sweets and things like that. So anyone can Google the Mediterranean diet pyramid and understand what should be included in our diet every day. But it has been studied extensively as being really nutritious for our brain and helping lower our risk for developing dementia.
And I think generally life stresses are extremely important to reduce. And I'd like to pass that on to Ryan, who specializes in that. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring into the discussion the field of human biology here, particularly peak performance. Because right now, while we're talking about dementia, we're talking about the neurodegenerative reality of aging. So from my perspective, what I'd like us to focus on just for a moment while we're talking about nutrition is the lifestyle that we're currently deciding to take on. So there's one project that was fantastic, and it kind of alludes to what Dr. Stelter was talking about when she referenced the Mediterranean diet. It's called Blue Zones Power 9. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that particular program, but basically what they did was they went around the globe and they studied centenarian populations. So populations that live to be 100 years old. There we go. She's an expert. So one of the 9 different rules that they focus on is eating with a plant slant. So in terms of the nutrition that we're getting from our diet, that's very important to consider. And here's something else to think about as well. So I'm 34 years old. If I honestly wanted to prevent dementia when I'm in my 60s, 70s, 80s, I should be building that temple of mine to make sure that I'm not promoting dementia formation with the diet that I'm eating today as a 30-year-old. Most people don't actually think about that on a regular basis. And so if I'm trying to stave off dementia later in life, it starts when I'm in my 20s and 30s. So limiting the McDonald's trips, the Taco Bell trips, the fast food runs to all the places that have all the processed foods and the heavy carbs, that's very important. Now, one other thing that Dr. Lord was mentioning was she was talking about the social stresses and the overall stress that we deal with. So one thing that's unique about the time period we're living in is we're living in a time period of rapid technological innovation. So when we're talking about diet and brain health, don't only think about the foods that you're consuming, also think about the content that you're consuming in your day-to-day lives. Sometimes technology facilitates, bad content. So that's something that as informed users of technology, we have to make sure that we guide, our developing brains when we're young into ingesting quality content, particularly in the world of social media and all of that. So just wanted to bring that into the discussion as well, because when we're talking about diet, diet is not just food, it's also content and things that feed our thoughts.
Thank you.
There's also this idea that environmental toxins like pesticides and certain medications, mold, as well as just bacterial and viral infections in general also cause dementia. Is that right?
Yes, I'll take that for a moment because I did a study in 2015, and we discovered that there's 2 types of dementia, actually, the true dementia that we're talking about today, but there's also cellular confusion, which was really, we could go back to the source, which was too many medications for too long. That will also bring you dementia. And if it's not changed, which we changed in some people, but if it's not changed early enough, then then you have to expect a full dementia diagnosis at the end of it. So anybody else wants to add something, Dr. Stelter?
Yeah, I just want to add, we don't think about this, but we get exposed to so many toxins throughout the day. And so it's really about looking for products that we use, anywhere from cleaning products to, different kinds of beauty products for us ladies and even men, the hair products that you use. I think I was I was talking to a woman years ago, and she said that by the time you walk out of your bathroom getting ready in the morning, you've exposed yourselves to over 750 toxins just by getting ready in the morning. And that doesn't include, of course, the stuff that you put in your mouth when you're eating breakfast. That's, full of processed food. So I think that we can all do better at educating ourselves at, various types of slight changes that we can make within our day-to-day of different products that we're using, of how we clean our house, or again, how we take care of ourselves. We can be switching to more natural products.
Yes, and another thing is the products. That's a good. There is an app on the market that I use daily. I went through my whole bathroom and look at. It's YUKA. It's an app that's free to download on your phone, and you can see what the toxins are and why it's so dangerous to remove them from your environment. So I would recommend that app for sure. That's all I want to mention on this point at this time. Ryan?
That's actually a very interesting point and a great point that you bring, Michael. So for 2 weeks, I did a little undercover project where I was working at LeafGuard, and I wanted to assess whether or not it was veteran friendly, because I had a client that was a veteran. And so for you, LeafGuard is a company that focuses on water removal. So they're gutter systems on your house. So during that time when I was there, I was focused on all the health and, the things that most people, when they're in sales, don't focus on. But one of the things that I learned, which was fascinating to me, is, most houses, at least in my part of Ohio, where I'm living, were built somewhere in the 70s or the 90s, unless there's brand new housing accommodations that were just put up. So a lot of people live in those homes. Now, most of those homes probably didn't change their water management systems at any point in time. So if you have one of the old school gutters that have nails that actually hold your gutter in place onto your house, over a long period of time, water starts to whittle into the wood and starts to actually drip into your boards. So the air quality in some of these middle class to lower class homes are atrocious, to be honest. And most people don't have efficient means to actually go in and either afford the cleaning that's required in order to clean up the house, or to make sure that their air quality is actually promoting health and well-being. So it's a major cause of dementia, but not just dementia, other health issues as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I hope I'm not disappointing you guys by trying to dig too deep into these causative factors. But it's a huge topic. Each one of these questions could be an hour-long, 5-hour-long discussion in itself. So I'm just trying to fireball these things out here. We think of we associate Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia with, for example, genetics, particularly the APOE4 variant. That's an increased risk. But what it sounds like is, regardless of these genetics, these genes are not deterministic. They're not going to automatically give us Alzheimer's, and most likely it's going to be the lifestyle, behavioral, nutritional changes that we make that are really going to make the difference. But like you've mentioned, we are going to get older and older, and there will reach a point where we're just going to get it. But yeah, are there any other sort of lifestyle factors that you'd like to comment on, or comment on this comment? Maybe I'm completely wrong here. Talk about the role of genetics, and then anything else, if there's anything there, and then we'll move on away from the causative stuff.
Well, some of these lifestyles that we see today will take us 20, 30 years to find out. For example, legalizing certain drugs, like in Maine, they didn't have that legal before. In my own experience, my father-in-law, there were 12 children. 8 of them had vascular dementia, including my husband, and he has 2 sisters who are now coming down with dementia. We call that familial because we know there's something in that family. And even the mother. The father had dementia with 7 of his siblings, and my husband's mother had dementia at the end of life, which I think was caused by her aging also, and other things, traumas that she had at the end. So I want to pass it on to Dr. Stelter for the rest of it, please.
Yes, no, I mean, definitely, Michael, what you're talking about with the APOE gene is specific to Alzheimer's disease. And We actually receive we have two of those genes. We get one from our mother, one from our father, and there's a number associated with it from 1 to 4. And if we have a 4 on any of the combination or a 4-4, we're at a higher risk for developing it. But it does not guarantee that we're going to get it. And
That's
if
right.
we are aware of this, I mean, I think regardless if we're aware of it or not, we should live a healthier lifestyle. But I think for folks that they tend to avoid to want to know. But I think that if we are aware that we are predisposed to this, that we have the ability to hopefully change that trajectory by changing, the way that we eat or the way that we sleep or, exercise, all those kinds of things. And I think that it's important that we educate ourselves so we can be more prepared and be able to lower our risk as much as we can. We can't necessarily 100% prevent it, but I think that, knowledge is power. And so I think that if we keep ourselves informed and we are starting to see, with the ability of research that we are more readily able to access and understand whether we are predisposed through potential blood tests and things like that. I think that, the wave of the future is going to allow us to be able to be more knowledgeable about whether or not what does our path look like, whether it is about dementia or it's about cancer, things like that. Research is really just a wonderful thing that's helping us out.
If I could dovetail just very briefly on that, Dr. Stelter mentioned the E word, exercise, and the data is showing that exercise is indeed one of the most effective ways to at least forestall Alzheimer's. If you stop and think on a very macro level, and I think your viewers will find this interesting, if you look at the history of healthcare worldwide, it's really been about defeating pathogens, bacteria and viruses for the most part. Not that we're done with them, but the metabolic range of diseases is becoming much more prevalent. And of course, there's a lot of data that shows that Alzheimer's is very much related to metabolic issues. It's been called dementia 3. We know that a lot of the neurodegenerative diseases are affected directly by a depressed metabolic system. So just something that your viewers might find encouraging in the midst of all these other causative agents is just being very, very active and doing whatever they can to stimulate with nutrition, with exercise, to build as strong a metabolic basis as they can. If you look at the population of the world in video games, we have had the most sedentary generations in the history of the world. So why would it be a surprise that dementia, early onset dementia, is creeping earlier and earlier? The metabolic syndromes are simply kicking in quicker. And, when I was a kid, before the turn of the century, we spent most of the time outdoors and, very, very active. That's not the case anymore. So that's very problematic from a dementia point of view.
That was beautiful, Bill. I think we're all kind of excited to comment on that. So let's sit on this point of movement a little bit longer. Anyone else have any comments on how movement and why lack of movement might lead to us getting Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia earlier, and how by moving our bodies in different ways that might help maybe prevent us from getting it or offset the age at which we get it.
Well, I'm going to just start and then I'll pass it on. But I want to say that the body was created to be as a move. We have to move, otherwise we don't stay healthy. It just makes sense. You become atrophied even. I saw a man one time that sat so long, by the time he went to the hospital, he couldn't unfold his legs. And he was sitting, laying back with his knees up because he never moved. And his wife had warned him several times, you better get up and walk around. But he just wanted to watch television. It's as simple as that. But who else can add to that, Dr. Stelter?
Well, Ryan, you want to talk first? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll be brief and then turn it right back over to you. So when I was in medical school, one of the things that was really interesting, the school that I was at was an international program down in the Caribbean. So it was dubbed the Little United Nations. It was a very diverse education system. So one of the things that I found interesting was when they started talking about cardiovascular sciences, they asked the question, how many hearts do we as humans have? So everyone in the class is like, one, it's a no-brainer. And then we had this professor out of India. He goes, no, you have 2 hearts. All of us have 2 hearts. He goes, you have the main heart, but then you also have a little muscle down right by your calf called the popliteus muscle. And what he was basically trying to teach us was that the heart functions like a pump. and you have a secondary mechanism that assists that pump so that it removes the stress on your main pump. And that happens to be your leg motion or the kicking motion, like when you're riding a bike or when you're walking. So to get to your question about the importance of movement, think about your body as a system that's fueled by a pump. And then you have this computer that is fueled by that pump. So anything you do that minimizes stress on your main pump, aka exercise or walking, that's only going to help resources get to where they need to go, your muscles and your brain. And that's going to improve your organ system coherence. All of your organ systems interact with each other. And if your organ systems are coherently functioning, they're in tune like an orchestra, you have a healthy system. If one of your organ systems is out of balance, there needs to be compensation, there's energy shifts and, pathology forms. And then depending upon how you respond to that, it could exacerbate and get worse over time. So everything that, we do is all about prevention, improving the quality of care that you get once you're actually diagnosed. And then one of the things we haven't talked about yet, but is actually the meat and potatoes of the ICA, is the systems-based solution approach, which is the transactional dementia intelligence model, which doesn't only talk about dementia and focuses only on the patient. It talks about the entire system and the entire environment, which has to work coherently to make sure that the caregivers are taken care of, the individual with dementia is taken care of, and everybody that's involved has a say and is truly peak performing when it comes to assisting an individual and their families that has an individual living with dementia.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Ryan and Dr. Attell, or Dr. Lord, you had mentioned really great information around the physical impact of exercise on our body. And I just want to add to how it affects us cognitively as well as emotionally. And so we do know that, from a cognitive perspective, it is a form of tactile stimulation. And in part of my work in the dementia care field, I created a model called the Dementia Connection Model. And it's very sensory focused and how stimuli impacts us physiologically and also psychologically. Mm-hmm. And I think that what we need to understand is, from a cognitive perspective, is with this form of tactile stimuli from exercise that we receive, it actually is creating new neural pathways in our brain, and that process is called neuroplasticity. And so it helps us where it's actually kind of regenerating the brain, right? So we see dementia as kind of degenerative loss, right? But in the ability to create an opportunity for neuroplasticity to occur, it's actually creating new neural pathways in our brain. And then from an emotional perspective, we know that exercise increases serotonin in the body. And so serotonin is our happy chemical, right? So it allows us to feel less depressed and more content and more relaxed, right? Those kinds of things. And so exercise definitely has a physical impact, but definitely a cognitive and emotional impact. And I just want to add what Bill was saying about, what happened to the times when we were children and we would run around, right? I remember I would come home when the streetlights came on, right? So that doesn't happen anymore, but we need to get back to something like that while keeping our children safe, where they can be physically active and enjoy themselves at the same time, because exercise is paramount for us. I just want to add that the recommendation for our listeners today is 2.5 hours a week of a rigorous walk. So just think of a brisk walk. It doesn't have to be intense. You don't have to purchase a membership to a gym or, and purchase very expensive equipment. This could be something, just go outside for a brisk walk 2.5 hours a week.
Yes, that's a good example. When I was at the Job Corps as a senior counselor years ago, I was working with a person of Indian descent, Native Indian American. He somehow, and I don't know how he did it, but he was precise on the time, the day, not only the day, but the time that a student would hit the wall, because they all came in pretty well lit up on drugs. And I had them sign, I had them sign an agreement that when that happened, when they hit the wall, they would agree that they would come with me, or I would be accompanied by some security to bring them to the gym, put them on the treadmill for 20 minutes only. It changed everything. Why? Because serotonin was introduced. That's how we saved our student. Got over it.
Yeah, and exercise, especially the higher intensity exercise, like HIIT training, for example, will also increase the catecholamines, dopamine and norepinephrine, which also sort of opened up this window for neuroplasticity. So that's also good. Also, when I heard you guys talking, I had this idea about the senses, engaging more and more of the senses. Dr. Stelter mentioned the tactile component, but there's also this visual, spatial thing going on as well. So I had this idea of like, it's not just going to the gym and running and swimming and all this, but things like dancing and I don't know, other little things that force you to use more of your senses. Because if we're talking about neurodegeneration and brain cells dying, it's kind of like use it or lose it kind of thing, right? So if you're not using it, and we start to like use things less, we start moving less. Ryan was talking about the smartphones and technologies and stuff. We're just literally moving less. So if you don't gotta move, you're gonna just kill off those brain cells. If you don't need to see, there's even ideas. They say that people with hearing loss or who lack the sense of smell or have any kind of visual problems already, that kind of not necessarily causes dementia, but it's connected because you are losing certain abilities. I get into the sensory component of all this. I do promise we will get to the caregiving stuff, but this is still too exciting for me. Sensory experience and how we can use that to kind of shift the gear one way or the other.
Ryan?
Before we get into the sensory, one of the things that I want to talk about is vestibular versus proprioceptive input. So our brain receives basically two types of input. It's either where we're located or where we're located in space. So one of the types of vestibular input that I have relationships with is with a group that focuses on rotary vestibular training. So what they do when they build their sensory programs is they have this one little 5-minute tool where they spin around in a circle, and they have this harness that holds the individual upright. So they're spinning around their central axis. Now, what that has showcased to be a value for in the peak performance world, think ice skaters or your gymnasts. But as it pertains to the geriatric population, think balance and mitigating fall risk. So rotary vestibular training, what it's basically been evidenced to do is enhance the balance of an individual that goes on and takes the necessary time to train that vestibular system. As we age, that system starts to break down, and if you start to have issues with your balance, everything else falls apart at rapid speeds and rapid rates. So just wanted to bring that topic to the discussion because vestibular and proprioceptive input is fascinating when you're developing sensory programs, and there's many different ways that you can approach those two topics, but they're both foundational.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I can add to that too. When we talk about both from the person who is, let's say, trying to prevent dementia, that caregiver, that care partner, and then them taking care of someone living with dementia, really sensory stimuli can benefit both those individuals. And that's what we practice here at the ICA is how can we have it? It's really a totality, right, when it comes to this approach. And so when we, all of us humans are stimulated by various senses in the environment. And so it all depends. We're all individual in terms of what can influence us to make us happy, what can influence to make us scared, angry. I tell individuals, it's kind of this feeling of, let's say you're riding in the car and a music song comes on that reminds you of your high school sweetheart who broke your heart, right? And it makes you feel sad. And you and I, we can change the channel because we maybe don't want to feel sad in that moment. And then we turn on Metallica, which I love, and we are then excited or we're motivated, right? And that's what motivates me, but another song might motivate somebody else differently. And that's why music is so powerful for the brain. And so you and I can change that stimuli to really gear us towards what kind of feeling we want to experience, which ultimately affects our behaviors. And that's cognitive behavioral theory at its finest. We can do the same impact with people living with dementia by being able to change their stimuli to something that we know will influence them in positive ways. So if that's what they're looking at, what they're hearing, what they're smelling, what they're tasting, etc., right? We can influence their feelings, and then that impacts the way that they're acting. So ultimately what we want to do is power ourselves as caregivers and care partners with a number of these stimuli that we can have in our toolbox, I call it, or tool belt, that we can implement on a daily basis in a more structured way for people living with dementia. So stimuli in of itself affects all humans, and we as caregivers and care partners can use it to benefit them, but ultimately it benefits us as well.
Absolutely.
And we all have brains, so all this stuff that's going to help the people with dementia is probably going to help people without dementia. I'm assuming. Let's move a step away for a minute, away from all this causal, preventative stuff, etc., and look at the state of affairs. What is the current status of dementia around the world at the moment?
Well, the statistics are pretty clear. We know that actually, I mentioned it before, the diagnoses are up to 55 million and over, and 6.7 million right here in the United States. There's the World Health Organization also confirms that, but I know from being in the field, and Dr. Stelter would agree with that, I'm sure that there's many more than that are not even diagnosed and won't be diagnosed until after death if they do an autopsy on them. So, but the numbers in 2030, the numbers of people with dementia is expected to reach 78 million. That's an estimate.
Is that the United States or globally or?
Global.
Okay.
Another global figure for 2050, which time flies, is 139 million. So, Dr. Stelter was mentioning the percentage after age 65, 50%. If I asked anyone, if you were to have an operation and the chances of coming out alive was 50%, would you do the operation? That's pretty high. 50% is pretty high. If they told me I could have the operation 10%, only 10% may not make it, I have a 90% chance, I'll do it. So that's why the lifestyle is so important, but there's other factors that we just said, physical activity, so important. It's not happening now. Cycling, for example, is one of the best exercises you can do, cycling. Walking, a brisk walk, but if you have flat feet or bad knees, or you can still bicycle. You can still do something. You have to stay active. That's really important. So the average life expectancy is still, they still say about 10 years. However, after diagnosis, it can really go up to 2 and to 26 years is what I found in the statistics. But I know for a fact a person that lived 40 years with dementia, Alzheimer's. So it depends on your body, depends on your genes, it depends on a lot of things.
And I think too, Dr. Lord, it's really about also the care that you're provided, because quality of life really can come from the caregiver and care partner and how the individual is treated every day. And this includes the type of approaches and medical treatment that's used too. I think we all can agree here that psychotropic medication, which is typically used in this disease process to help to manage some of the behavioral expressions that come about, it's overused, and it unfortunately, every psychotropic has a slew list of side effects that can continue to damage the brain. Now, I'm not saying that there's no room for medication, but I'm a big proponent of using non-pharmacological tools or sensory-based tools as a very first approach, and trying it time and time again. And if something doesn't work, you try something else before moving to a medication that ultimately has the black box warning of death, right? I think we need to equip ourselves better with education and with resources that are out there to be able to better care for the individual. And those resources are out there. It's just partnering with the right groups of individuals like people at the ICA.
If I could just dovetail very briefly there, I agree with everything Dr. Stelter said. Against this huge tidal wave that's being described here of dementia care, that's just the diagnosed cases. Many of them are not diagnosed. Dementia can begin decades before it's actually diagnosed. But against that, what we're seeing, Michael, is an exodus of people from the industry. So what's really happening is we're approaching a crisis crossroads in care. And so what happens is when people reach a certain level of severity, even most family caregivers put them into managed care at some level. The problem is the people in that managed care don't really have the kind of training that really deals effectively with the issue. Really, what happens in a lot of cases is just sort of a warehouse of people that can no longer be managed at home. And when they get unmanageable in the managed care setting, then they get the psychotropic drugs that Dr. Stelter was talking about, and it's really quality of life goes down for everybody. So just wanted to make a point that, what we are about as an organization is really predicated in Dr. Lord's landmark book that she wrote in 2015, Alzheimer Coaching. And because of her 21-year odyssey of dealing with it and seeing the system from the inside out, she got a little radicalized and decided it was time for a revolution in dementia care worldwide. And so that birthed the ICA 20 years ago. But over that period of time, there's been a continual progression of, well, really, what should it look like? And her book talks about a systems approach. Ryan mentioned that a minute ago. And I know we don't have much time here, so I wanted, if I could, to just touch on the fact that it's a fundamental reshuffling of the deck in the dementia care world. And it really is not about incremental changes. I'd like to bring in Pat here for a moment, and then Andrew to just talk about, fundamentally, we're talking about going into that industry and offering an alternative that we hope in 10, 15 years, there'll be an army of people who are equipped with the kinds of really advanced sort of psychologically aware systems that we're putting in place. Pat, could you speak to us for just a minute about the importance of team restructuring in dementia care and how what you're doing really reshuffles the deck, brings in a dementia coach, and what kind of tool you need to do that with?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So, we need to focus on the team aspect of delivering care. There's multiple people involved in this whole environment where care is delivered, where people are supported, and the teams that are involved need to be able to work very effectively together. And so, what we've been finding is that a self-awareness of each of the individuals involved in that team is absolutely crucial. They need to understand how they naturally and typically show up to the job. So, of course, we've talked about knowledge, we've talked about skills, we've talked about, some vital aspects of knowledge that people need to have in order to deliver their care and understand what's really going on. But we very often don't understand how we actually show up in a situation, what we ourselves bring into any kind of team situation. And so, the teams are under stress and under pressure. There's a lot that's demanded of people in these situations when they're constantly giving care, and sometimes the tensions that exist on these teams are quite exhausting. The stresses that people will feel just in their daily tasks, their daily role, and there are ways in which we can learn to work together. And so the first thing that we would be seeking to do is get an understanding of, well, who do you have currently on your team? Who's delivering the care? And what roles are they playing? Yes, it's crucial that the various roles are covered, various tasks and responsibilities are delegated, but also then, well, how is each person then showing up on the job? How is each person then interrelating with each other? We're using a tool under the umbrella of what we call Team Me, which is a way of profiling individuals to give us that view of who they are, what makes them tick as individuals, and then that once we have that view of each of the individuals on the team, we can actually then predict pretty much how those relationships play out amongst them.
Before we dig further into your system, let's zoom out a bit and talk about what the general existing system of healthcare and long-term care and all this is, and what are some of the problems in the current system that the ICA is trying to solve.
Okay, I'll just start that, but I'll pass it on to Bill. It's obsolete. In one word, it's obsolete. We're using it, it's obsolete. So we have to create a new system, and this is the first system I see in the world. I'm sure there will be many more, but we are the first system to really solve some of the major problems that we see. Bill, would you continue, please?
Yeah, just briefly, all across senior living, the major issue is burnout of staff. But when you get to dementia care, it's exponentially greater. And you can imagine what goes on here. You have people who are being paid minimum wage in many cases at the line level. They're cast into very long 12-hour shifts, maybe multiple 12-hour shifts. You can put yourself in that place. And you're dealing with people who are some of the most difficult people in the world to actually communicate with and motivate unless you know how to do it. So what happens is these people get very burnt out, they get very depressed, and not surprisingly, huge staff churn in the dementia care world. So in terms of remaining economically viable, it's very difficult for dementia care providers to stay really viable because they have this enormous hemorrhaging of talent and staff. There's other issues that come into play, technology deficits. There hasn't been a lot of innovative thinking that's come in there that's now available. ICA is extremely motivated, and I believe we brought some of the best minds in the world together to collectively solve this issue and to inject very, very visionary thinking and leading edge technologies and approaches, both soft sciences like psychology, management, coaching is at the center of our model versus a very hardcore white stiff jacket medical, kind of model. Very much more into coaching and highly relational. Training and education gaps, which we are really throwing ourselves in the gap to solve that with some of the most exciting kinds of things. I hope we'll do a follow-up sometime and really talk about specifically some of the ways that you really deal with people who no longer have a left brain. I mean, imagine it. The left brain is deteriorated and the right brain is deteriorating, and now you have to be able to have a transaction with that person. So transactional analysis is very fundamental. I could go on and I won't, but all that to say, our note of urgency is there's a crisis coming. The good news is that there are some solutions here, but it has to be a systems approach, not a method approach. And what a lot of people are coming forward with, this method or that method, but we've stepped back, Dr. Lord has stepped back and created a very spectroscopic kind of look at this thing and said, you have to fix all the moving parts. And if we do that, we can move into truly the 21st century with a quantum leap that's going to save staff people. Usually many caregivers die before the people they're giving care to in a family setting. We pulled the family in. A lot of families feel alienated once their resident or their senior person gets into a memory care center. They're shut out. They don't want to hear from them. But actually, nobody knows more about and has the historical memory record that person lacks. So we're looking at all of those things and pulling together, as you can see here, some very interesting, gifted individuals to come up with solutions, and we're doing that worldwide. And we're getting an enormous outpouring from the industry saying, we've been waiting for this. This is what we've been looking for. And we're very exhilarated to be a part of what's going on there. We think it can be turned around, but it's got to be turned around quickly, or we're going to have a lot of people suffering and dying prematurely.
And Michael, what I found in the 21 years I was taking care of my husband, studying and researching and actually working at it, is that the importance of a dementia coach. I acted as a dementia coach unbeknownst to any of these facilities, but I did it in many, many places. And I realized that if the doctor, the nurse, the CNA, the janitor could come to me and say, what do I do? How do I speak to this person? What am I going to do now? This is what's happening. I was able to coach them, either give them information or actually offer a service that would help them. It made a big difference. I returned to these facilities where I tried all this experiment, and the energy was way down now, way down, because there's no more dementia coach. The dementia coach is almost like the doctor in the hospital. It's as important as that. The surgeon, whoever, that person is doubly certified in education, in what we call dementia intelligence that Dr. Stelter offers, and also in coaching. So it could be life coaching, nurse coaching. It could be any type of coach certification. But that's required because we don't want the dementia coach to be a counselor or a doctor. We want them to be a coach. very important. But they coach the janitor, they coach the doctor. We train the janitor, we train the doctors, and everybody in between. And we form the teams that are really important. They value each other more. They can do more for the organization, more for themselves. It's really nice when you have this orchestra and all the instruments playing together. They have the music.
Right, it's about working together.
Yeah.
Right, right. It's working together as a team.
Yes.
It's not being in
Yes.
competition with each other. And I think that that's one of the major downfalls we see is that a lot of practitioners and specialists work in silos. And that's the problem is we're not working together for that individual. And, to Bill's point too, the technology needs to catch up. And I think that we're getting there where there can be one system where, the gerontologist puts in their information and then the, neurologist puts in theirs and the physical therapist puts in theirs. And if we're all communicating together as a team and working together, that family system, right? It's not about just the individual, it's the family system. They're served in the most appropriate, most effective way.
And the term I use for that is single entry. So the coach even has access to all this information and includes their information in it. The most important thing is we talked about the hard work of dementia care. Under our program, which is a licensed program, the CNA, who does the heaviest part of the work, works 6 hours for an 8-hour pay. Limitation is 6 hours. After 6 hours, I noticed that the work is not appropriate. It's often rushed, and it's often even omitted. So 6 hours, they go home, they have a good pay. Do you know what? They can't get rid of them because nobody else does that. So they want to come back the next day. We keep the same people and we keep training them over and over again. They have to be recertified every quarter, every year. It's very important. It's very different than what we know now. It's no longer obsolete.
Yeah. And so we're starting to get into specific solutions. For example, this team systems-based approach. But before digging further into this, I still want to paint the picture a little bit more vividly. So basically, as the dementia progresses, there's sort of this gradual loss of independence, and people do need care from others at some point. In some countries, like in China, it might be more at-home care. They might be using more Chinese medicine rather than Western drugs. But it seems that at least in the United States and certain Western countries, people get pushed into these facilities as kind of, I imagine, like a kind of nursing home type thing where there's a few people walking around helping them. But I don't know. I'm trying to get the visual of the actual space, what's going on, what's there, and also put the camera inside the person's head with dementia. What's their perspective? What's their frustrations? How do they feel in this world? And yeah, there's this other character, these caregivers. What's their camera view? What's their frustrations? How do they feel about this whole thing? So there's this world that I want to get painted, and I want sort of this camera from these two perspectives. So if anyone can help fill in this picture, I think then when we start talking about the solution, it'll make a lot more sense. So let's dig into the problem and to kind of just paint a vivid world here.
Okay, I'm going to answer some of that, but Ryan, did you have something to say right now?
Yeah, sure. The first thing I wanted to bring into focus is how scary it must feel. So there was a documentary that Bill Gates aired, I believe like a half decade ago, where he was talking about his greatest fear is his brain shutting down and not working. So that's almost exactly what's happening on an individualized basis when you're going through dementia. Now, that's where there's a lot of different theories in terms of how an individual's behavior is going to manifest. But one of the things that I think we can all kind of agree on is if an individual has a lot of adverse childhood experiences, or they've experienced a lot of trauma earlier on in their lives, they're more likely to become the aggressive or the combative patients when things become scary. So keep in mind, when your brain's starting to break down and certain senses aren't as vivid as they used to be, your communication, your proprioception, your balance in every facet of what you do starts to also deteriorate as well. So that's what I'd like to bring to the table.
Okay.
Dr. Lord?
We address that in what I call the elite TDI training. We know how the brain functions and what's going on exactly. So inside the brain, you're talking about inside the brain of the person living with dementia, there is no longer judgment. There's no longer rationality, logic. That's the left side of their brain. Pretty well goes into a shadow. Pretty well, it's like a shade coming down and closing that. And so you have to deal with the right brain. And we train people to access the right brain when they're communicating with individuals living with dementia. Because the most important thing, and he's right as far as being scary, it is scary. It's also physically painful, extremely painful. Nobody ever says that. The massive headaches that they have because of the atrophy in the brain shrinking from 3 pounds to 1 pound, is extreme. I know that because I was able to detect that in my studies and my research. And so if you're not able to serve that population using your right brain, which is creativity, which is love, affection, those kinds of things, the person living with dementia, the most important thing to convey to them is that they are loved and they are protected. I'm here for you. I will give me that permission to protect you, and I will protect you. They need to know that, and they need to feel it. Okay? My next book, The Gift of Dementia, a gift we have yet to unwrap, is going to be talking about all kinds of experiences like that and proving exactly what I'm saying. So for the caregiver, if the caregiver is not able to switch from left brain to right brain, but they need both of them because they have to make a decision, medical decisions many times, or even a security point they need to address, they're going to struggle. They're going to be exhausted. They're going to be tired. They're going to burn out. So we train them so that they don't do that. We train them with the tools that they need to do that job effectively, keep people safe, love them where they are in the present. If anything, a caregiver learns to live in the present. That's a beautiful gift. Dr. Stelter, do you have something to add?
Yes, absolutely. So when we just look at the system itself, right? So Michael, to kind of go back to your original question, what's there, right? Individuals who want to stay at home longer, at least here in the United States, there's home care services, right? Where we have caregivers that come into the individual's home and helps to provide care alongside, the family members, right? And then when that is either they can't afford it or it's not helping or whatever the case might be, or they, unfortunately, a person takes a medical turn for the worse, right? Then they move into a higher level of care, we call it. So there's an assisted living that's available, right? Where they have to be able to take care of themselves to some degree, not total care. And then there's what we call skilled nursing care, where there's a total care that can be provided, right? So there's these levels of care that are available in the market, but the challenge with that is many of these organizations that offer these services don't dedicate their time and energy and funds to training those who are taking care of people living with dementia. And so what we see is a lot of mishaps where whether it's mistreatment or it's overuse of psychotropic medication or other types of treatment that aren't necessarily geared for people living with dementia, right? And we just see this challenge of the caregiver burning out, like Bill was talking about, because the individual doesn't feel prepared. They feel incompetent. Any move or tool they use doesn't work because they aren't truly trained in a quality way. And so it's important for us to have these organizations realign where their priorities are, to understand that when you train your staff in a quality way, you're going to have the end result of what you're looking for, which a lot of these organizations want to bring in census, right? They want to drive revenue. They want to improve their clinical outcomes. That starts with training. And until we can get organizations to understand this, we still have an uphill battle, and I think there's still a struggle there.
Yes, and we can show them actually that they will do better under the new system. They will actually do better financially. Their workforce will stay. People will be looking, they'll have a waiting list. People will be looking to go in there. We have a service too with the ICA where they call that challenged dementia patients that go into acute care based on some of the things that Dr. Stelter just mentioned. The workforce is not able to deal with the condition, and so they get unmanageable. They send them to the hospital, psych units. They come out of there and they have to be place in post-acute placement, which when you know that you can say that you have a TDI system, that you operate with that system, there will be number one on the list to accept these patients. And those patients will never return to the hospital because we know how to deal with that. That's how precious it is. That's how desirable the whole system, the TDI system is. And that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah. God, it must be the most horrifying experience. Not only, as Ryan mentioned, are you still stuck with those childhood traumas? You're like this 70-year-old person, and you still got that underneath. That's getting unleashed. You got to deal with that because that's always been there. But now you don't have this sort of executive control or whatever kind of protecting you from all that. You're losing your identity, you're losing your social connection, you're losing your sense of safety, and it's physically painful. It just goes on and on. It just sounds like it's like the worst of it all. You're just totally dying. There's this beautiful quote from Dr. Lord's book that I want to read. Everything seems to be taken away with Alzheimer. The memories, the ability to speak and choose, respond, because the voice is silenced. But the heart and feelings are very much alive.
That's right.
Between stimulus and response, there's a large gap. Space with deafening silence and fear, waiting to be heard and valued again.
Mm-hmm.
In this silent gap remains a human being full of love and dreams. So the human is still there.
Yes.
Everything is still there.
Yes.
But they just talk about that.
Well, and there's the other side of that too, Michael. I know what you're saying, and it's that's a majority of people look at it that way. However, when I said there's a gift in dementia, I mean that because their heart is still pumping. They still have the right brain, which is hopefully is and luckily is housing love and creativity, intuition, which most people don't even use their intuition today. So by using those skills that they still remain to the time of death, by the way, and if you understand that well, which is what I teach in my elite TDI program, you see the true gifts of dementia. They are able to take us to places we have never imagined because they are very creative. If you look at a child that plays and draws drawings and explains their drawings, it's almost magical, isn't it? So that's what I see in those people that are 70, 80, 90 years old, maybe older. But what I feel sad about is those people that they say are unmanageable. They send them to the hospital when in fact is the care provider that's unmanageable. Do you understand that? So we're changing that around. We're putting it on its feet and saying, hey, look at this. This is what's happening. This is what can happen. Let's do it.
Okay, so it sounds like what you guys are doing is you're taking the systems approach where you're realizing there are a lot of people involved in this and you're getting them all kind of working together as a team, but you're also bringing in new characters into this world, basically this dementia coach, perhaps some other players. Yeah, talk about all the different people that are involved or should be involved in this dementia care, and how you get them working together to fix all this.
The dementia coach. One person, the dementia coach.
Okay, there we go. Simple. Yes.
Quick answer.
So talk about the dementia coach. What's special about the dementia coach? What does the dementia coach do? What is the dementia coach?
The dementia coach is responsible to actually train everybody from the janitor. I want the janitor that goes in to mop the floor, to dust the desk, to talk to that person that's there with dementia, living with dementia. They have to know how to do that. I want the doctor that comes in maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I want that person to be able to communicate with that patient. The dementia coach is responsible to train the entire organization because they're ready to be that. They're teachers. They're also coaches. Dr. Stelter's program has a special certificate for that. Train the trainer, we call it. We also call them internal coaches because large organizations need an internal coaches. The licensing demands that you have a coach in every facility you own. We just got a call yesterday with an organization with 10 facilities. There'll be 10 dementia coaches. But that's all you need is a coach, a dementia coach to change that whole system. We deal with the dementia coach. We support the dementia coach. Yes, Ryan?
Yeah, just to make quick sense out of it. So, for people living in the United States, a good way to think of the dementia coach is if you're a fan of football, it's like a quarterback that's calling the offense. If you're a fan of soccer over in Europe, the dementia coach is wearing number 10 and they have the captain armband. So that dementia coach is equipped with some surface level knowledge of everybody that's involved, from the family members, the medical teams, the nurses, the actual caregivers, all of them. But then that's the person who makes the decisions whenever there's misunderstandings or something that needs to occur on behalf of the patient or on behalf of the caregiver or the medical team. The dementia coach brings it all together and makes those difficult decisions. Because most people don't think about this. Medical doctors aren't trained in dementia intelligence unless they come to a program like what Dr. Stelter and Dr. Lord offer. It's continuing education. So if you just go into the field and you don't have that dementia intelligence awareness, or you don't have that dementia coach on staff, that's likely why the field has been a horror show for so long, because they've literally been missing this very important piece.
It's almost like sending a dentist into a heart surgery department and asking him to do heart surgery because he's a dentist, so he's doctor so and so. So let's fix that person with the heart, open heart surgery. You just can't do it. So that's what we're asking today. We're asking people to go in there. They have no idea. They can't even communicate. They have no idea how to communicate. And communication is everything. If you break communication, you have nothing.
I think that, leader, right, coordinator, right, educator, right, but also a model, someone who practices what they preach. They every day are that representation of what true dementia care looks like, and are able to resemble that on a regular basis when they're interacting with people that they're caring for, or even when they're interacting with the team themselves. They're giving the same respect they would to the people living with dementia to their team, and vice versa.
One way of looking at it is it solves a very sad but real dichotomy in for-profit organizations. Dr. Stelter alluded to it earlier. You have a tension between profitability and the level of care, right? And there is usually, it's going to win from the top down. Unfortunately, the people who are at the very top are the least knowledgeable about what is really needed there. So what you really have is an empowered tiebreaker who goes in there and really is recognized by top management as someone who has the authority to call the shots. Think of it as someone who's an advocate for the least vulnerable, least vocal person in the organization, which is the person suffering from dementia. That dementia coach knows exactly what's going on in the life of each one of those dementia persons and is making sure that they get individualized care and they're not becoming victims of the overall
Obsolete system.
dynamics of a system that we're going to look back in 10 years and say it was medieval, and how did that ever happen? So this is a true resident-centric model, just looking at it organizationally.
But Michael, I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about inclusivity, which is very close to my heart.
Yeah.
And Dr. Harrison is going to speak on that, if we can wake him up. Are you awake?
Yeah, I'm over here. But yeah, the question of inclusivity is true across all populations who interact with the healthcare system. We're talking space here that borderlines between the home environment and the healthcare system. So we already have a vulnerable population on our hands. The elderly are a vulnerable population. You could think of this from reasons as basic as frailty that come with age.
Yes.
And then we could start to talk generically about cognitive decline without even getting into dementia or Alzheimer's disease. But now we have this population with an increasingly severe cognitive decline. So a very vulnerable population that we're dealing with. And that can be compounded by all sorts of other factors that are true of the, again, general population interacting with the healthcare environment. I think one big one we have in mind here is the LGBT population, lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual. The acronym goes on: queer, intersex, asexual. It goes on even more.
Yeah. It's like A B C D F G A. Yeah.
Yes, to Spirit, I could keep going for quite a while, but the idea of it, it's been known for quite a long time. Once again, starting with fundamental data, the LGBT population is at a much, much higher abuse risk, both at home and from providers directly.
Oh
And when you
God.
start again adding all these factors on, like advancing age, cognitive impairment, really it starts to become, in my opinion, quite disturbing how high these numbers can go. And I would also argue it's not well studied around most of the world,
Hmm.
where
Yeah.
we don't have such sophisticated care, such advanced technology, complex monitoring. So we don't really even know how high these abuse rates are. And as much as people talk about how high abuse is in the LGBT population, when you start singling out specifically something like the transgender population, physical abuse rates, because I'm not just talking something like yelling or emotional abuse, but physical abuse can be like 5 times higher in the transgender population compared to the lesbian, gay populations. So this is something that really there's not very much out there. Some people are trying from a research perspective to understand uh, better how to handle the needs of aging LGBT population. But
Yes.
from a perspective of medical training, this is not really taught. I think that's true as well of nursing and health specialties in general.
Hmm.
I'm not really sure that this is of very much financial interest to companies out there right now either, to say, is somebody driving innovation in this space separate from academia? I think the answer is largely no. So this is something also just to keep in mind. I know we were speaking in the beginning about risk factors of developing this disease. There are also so many risk factors surrounding surviving with the disease, and it's just one example. Stop here for now.
No, and safety, feeling safe and feeling connected and feeling like you're going to be okay. That's our sort of most fundamental thing. And when other people are abusing you or neglecting you, whether it's in childhood, which we kind of call trauma, or it's in these um, care facilities, and then when you throw in these extra variables of I don't know, transgender and gay and all these other things, the abuse and neglect just goes up. Yeah, I was hoping to kind of close this off pretty soon, but now we open up another little can here. Let's talk a little bit more about yeah, abuse and neglect, because this is the kind of stuff we don't want to talk about, and especially the people with the financial interest don't want to talk about.
Hmm.
But yeah, talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, if you want to start from more of the hospital environment, again, from first principles here, when there's something like a medical error in a hospital, physicians are obligated to report that. A lot of that quality data ultimately makes its way back to CMS, the Centers for Medicare, Medicaid Services, working in something like the surgical environment. The data is extremely rich, and you can also then take that data and work on patient safety formally to try to improve patient care. But yeah, there's a major breakdown talking about a long term care facility. What is the equivalent of that? If someone makes an error or there is some sort of grievance, how is it reported to potentially a private facility? How is data collected within that private facility? Is that reported back to a state or federal government entity in some way that they can examine the information, again, try to use the information to improve patient safety? It's, in my opinion, it's weak. It's the further you move away from operative environment in a hospital out into some environment closer to the community,
Hmm.
it all breaks down. And also, too, yeah, one of your opening comments there, it would be very helpful probably in the LGBT populations if people could interact with other LGBT, whether you want to call them patients or whatever language you want to use here inside something like a long term care facility. But How feasible is that? Is anyone even asking someone or a caregiver, a family, about something like sexual orientation and gender of a patient with dementia? Is that even known? And really, again, those questions, does that make that patient even more vulnerable in that type of environment? So it's a problem that doesn't have a great solution. And yeah, nobody wants to talk about it. I would argue people don't want to talk about abuse, assault, rape. These are some of the hardest subjects in medicine, but areas like emergency medicine, they deal with this routinely. And I'll stop here and I won't go any further, but in emergency medicine, this is dealt with from newborns all the way up to people 100 years old. So it's very difficult in the extremes of life. And
Yes.
talking about physiology, we often think of a U-shaped curve, like the immune system, for example. It tends to not function well in the young because it's still developing. In the elderly, it tends to not function well because it's simply fading away. It's a very similar phenomenon, this U shape of abuse, where you see extraordinary abuse in a very young, helpless, essentially, population like newborns that is never really talked about in the news. And when you start getting into extremely advanced age, people do not necessarily cope well hearing this sort of information that it's ongoing in our elderly population either. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah. Yeah, throughout history, we've had different ideas on what is a person, what is a human exactly, who gets the rights to not feel pain, etc. We used to do, maybe still do, experiments and things on babies before it was African Americans or women or whatever, that maybe we thought were just these machines that we could just do whatever we want with. We saw if animals were doing things too. I guess this does open up our lens and to show us, people with dementia also have feelings and feel pain very clearly. And then it gets to the whole point too. Like we look at people who are the other, right? So people who are LGBTQ, you're gonna say, well, they don't have the same sort of things that normal people have. I mean, they do, but it's whenever someone's so different from you, you treat them like a machine, and that leads to all kinds of problems. Yeah.
Yes, and that's one thing with the TDR. We are culturally sensitive. We know some of the countries that are absolutely not tolerant, that will actually kill those people. We know some people, some countries are embarrassed, and they think it's due to some other, they're possessed or something. Something has happened to that person to become like that. Few people know that there's a structural difference between you and I and somebody that is a part of that community, LGBTQ. So if there's a structural difference in your brain, it's not something you invented. It's not something you're possessed with. It's something you're born with. So we need to respect those people.
Then even the greater need for a dementia coach, right? Like these are the people who really need a dementia coach around there. The people who just cannot back themselves up and who are all ganged up against.
Yeah, and the dementia coach will be there.
Yeah, and if I can add to it, so in our curriculum for to become a dementia coach, we do include curriculum around abuse, and we specifically called mention and prevention, right? We have to talk about it, as Dr. Harrison said. We include learning about diversity and how important it is, and looking at what does diversity look like, from cultural to sexual preference to ethnicity, right? We have to learn about that. Not that we have to memorize all of what goes into each entity, because that's impossible, but when an individual comes into our care, we better become educated about it and be able to understand that these differences can make or break their education. I have a plethora of stories I can go into as to how a diverse, entity of that individual was not respected, and then they were treated poorly because of it. And really, it was due to the lack of knowledge from the caregiver themselves. They just weren't aware that this is a part of their culture or their preference or whatever it might be. Had they been better educated, they could have provided better care. So I don't think that oftentimes people who are at the end, the hand of the abuse, intentional. I can't say that everybody is, but I say a lot of the caregivers aren't intentional with their abuse, but it just happens. And it happens because they're not taking care of themselves. It happens because they're not educating themselves. It happens because they don't have the experience, right? But this can all be solved with proper training.
We also call that ignorance.
Yeah. Dr. Lord also mentioned earlier about communication being a key, maybe the biggest key in all of this. What sorts of things do these dementia coaches teach the other people in the environment, or just what are some communication techniques and things they use to help these people with dementia?
Well, they learn themselves how to communicate so that they can teach others how to do that, and they certainly explain how the brain, how come the brain of the person with dementia is different from their brain, and what does that mean? How do you do that? What is that person with dementia capable of? Because we look at capabilities and still gifts in that person instead of liability or being not able to do anything. They can do a lot. They can do a lot. We can measure the level of engagement, which we know that once you measure the level of engagement of that individual, it's not of the group, it's the individual, that individual can go on for several years maintaining that level. So that you don't see that drop in abilities or cognitivity because they were not able to engage. Not everybody plays bingo. Not everybody likes to go to a picnic or a barbecue and get really satisfied with that. So we look at what is their level of engagement. Some people are better with their hands. Why not give them something to do with their hands? Instead, they don't. They let them sit there and do nothing. It's passive activities. We want activities that are bringing back memories. We want people to be engaged, whatever it is, physical, cognitive, or spiritual. We want the whole person. So that dementia coach is well educated in dementia intelligence, which we know that they understand the brain, they understand how that person feels, they understand the background. First of all, we talked earlier, and some people say sometimes, oh, how come my husband is so aggressive? He never was aggressive. And I asked them, do you know anybody that knew that person as a young child? And we know where that comes from, that aggressive response. So if that person, when they were a child, were abused and always had to be aggressive to protect themselves, well, guess what? They're going to do that again. That's okay. Your brain is hardwired for feelings. And those feelings are sad, glad, and mad. You're not hardwired for logic or reasoning. So we want to stay with that.
I can go on and on and on about all of this. This is all important stuff, but I do want to blast forward into the future a bit with talking about some of the latest tools and technologies that might help people with dementia. Maybe they are tools that you might be using or not using in the ICA. The first one I'm going to go to is one that I have a feeling that you are also a bit wary of and maybe trying to avoid. Maybe that's not the case. First, let's just hit it. Pharmaceuticals. What are your thoughts on pharmaceuticals? I know they're giving these guys antipsychotics. They're giving them all kinds of crazy drugs that probably shouldn't be given. There are these ones developed that tap into the cholinergic system that don't seem to quite be working. Just give me a little quick little overview on your thoughts on the pharmaceutical thing. This might just be opening up a whole war zone, but yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'm just going to say, and then I'll pass it on because I'm not the medical doctor on the team. The less, the better. That's all I'm going to say. And the most, if you can replace things with natural nutritional supplements, the better. Because if there's an interaction, you'll know exactly what's going on. The more drugs, like I said, cellular confusion, you're going to get that on top of dementia. Give me a break. So Ryan, take that over, please.
The topic that I wanted to bring up when you brought this topic up was adverse drug reactions and how prominent they are. Mm-hmm. Now, about 8 years ago, I was introduced to a concept called pharmacogenomic testing. Now, it is a little bit controversial, so I don't really want to go too much in detail. But one of the cool things about pharmacogenomic testing is it at least reveals information to the doctor before they prescribe pharmaceuticals. And it tells you on an individualized basis how likely a combination of different drug cocktails would produce these adverse effects specific to the individual. So when you're thinking about dementia care and anyone that's getting the type of, drug treatments that we're discussing here, they're not just getting the antipsychotics and, the things that depress them and sedate them. They're also getting, medications for their heart, their blood pressure. There's a whole slew of different pharmaceuticals that are going into one patient. So adverse drug reactions are prominent in the field. So it's something that we need to address and innovate new technologies, particularly in the facilities that jump to the pharmaceutical intervention. So there's other technologies that don't use pharmaceuticals, but that enhance the teamwork. So there's basically two types of value that I'm aware of the different tools and technologies that are out there. There's tools that are out there to enhance the caregiver's ability to provide care. There's tools that are basically surveillance technologies that allow family members to, I guess, kind of have a view into the process. And then there's also emotional detection technologies that when you get into some of the really state-of-the-art facilities can anticipate stress on an individualized basis, but also start to anticipate what you can do to mitigate stress, not just on the caregiver side, but also on the patient side of the coin. Now, the other type of value that some of the technologies out there are offering are educational. So one of the tools that we've discussed is QEEG brain mapping. Not going to go too much into the details there, but basically what that allows an individual to do is it allows them to self-assess how they're perceiving the world. And then from that data point, it allows them to learn what they need to do to communicate efficiently with other individuals in their direct environment. So QEEG brain mapping is something from the caregiver side of the coin that teaches people how to develop adequate coping skills with stress, how to develop tolerance and discipline when you're in the workplace environment so that you can remain professional when dealing with the types of stresses that you have to deal with, which are very unique relative to other caregiving scenarios. But then on top of all of that, this is where PAD, can kind of elaborate a little bit more. The QEEG data report allows an individual to kind of have an inside look at how an individual perceives the world, which teaches empathy between the different teammates that are in a scenario. So as you were hitting on, Michael, being able to communicate effectively is very important in the dementia environment. And if that communication breaks down, it leads to the horror shows. So you want to figure out what you can do to improve the communication, and empathy, in my opinion, is very important in order to promote quality communication.
Yeah, well said, Ryan. And I just want to add to that, just practically what I see in just day-to-day experiences is that the psychotropic medication is often used as needed. And when it's used as needed, it's used as a Band-Aid for that particular moment. And as Dr. Lord was saying earlier, that oftentimes the reaction of the individual living with dementia is based on what the caregiver has stimulated them or has provided as a stimulation in that environment that's negative in nature to that person. And so it's a reaction that occurs that then inserts the psychotropic medication. So for example, let's just say that, the nurse is speaking very loudly at the nurse's station with their, colleagues, and they're laughing and, speaking loudly. And the people living with dementia are around and they start to act out because they aren't, loud noises excite them in a negative way. And that's a negative stimuli to them. So then the nurse interacts with the person living with dementia who's, let's just say, trying to get up and wander away because they don't like the noise. And the nurse then approaches them kind of maybe abruptly or, aggressively because they're scared that the individual is going to fall. Yeah. So as they're going towards that person with dementia, the person with dementia is trying to protect themselves. So they have a swap or a spit or something that says, this is scaring me, get away from me. And so then the nurse takes it as, oh, this individual is being aggressive. Let's give them a psychotropic medication to calm them down. And that's how typically the interaction happens so much. And how great would it be when we talk about technologies? Let's talk about non-pharmacological tools, we educate a lot about aromatherapy. So instead of giving that antipsychotic or that anti-anxiety medication that has a plethora of side effects and can have adverse side effects, what Ryan was saying with other medications that they're taking, how about diffusing lavender essential oil? It works faster. It has a much better appearance on the brain and the body. It's more effective in clinical trials that it shows. So it's replacing some of the psychotropic medication with other tools that can be used. And in general, you can use lavender as a preventative approach to keep the individual calm and centered so that way they aren't getting to that point of agitation. And what's great is that the nurse who excites themselves because they see the individual falling, they will also be calm by diffusing lavender essential oil. So everyone on the team wins.
This can also be viewed too as an inclusivity issue. The mental health in general, that there is, again, going to be a population that has schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, even major depressive disease, generalized anxiety disorder. So some of these people will be on medications and go on to develop dementia, and that can be very hard to manage. It's separate from that question of, do you give an antipsychotic to someone with dementia to calm them down? What do you do about someone who has schizophrenia, who probably needs antipsychotics, because they could still go psychotic in a demented state on top of that. That gets into complex medical management, but again, there's still an inclusivity aspect to it.
But yeah, it gets complex because now these people with dementia also have oftentimes other mental health conditions, especially things like depression. They've got anxiety disorders. They might have schizophrenia, bipolar, all this different stuff. It's a whole slew of. It's a very unique brain. How do you help this person with their unique brain, with their unique life?
Well, I've had people with schizophrenia. What happens is, as long as I was able to convey authentically with my heart, with all my being, that I was there to protect them, to keep, that I would be protecting them and stay with me, have their confidence. It's not as hard to manage as if you think that they're going to kill you. Okay? I had a situation one time in a nursing home where this man was very agitated, was following me down the hall because he had seen me there every day. I never missed a day to protect my husband from neglect and abuse. And he was following me down the hall, and he said, I want to speak to my brother. And the nurses were all getting together behind a desk to protect themselves because they thought he was going to be aggressive. And I took him to the desk to the nurses, and I said he would like to speak to his brother. And one nurse had a tear in her eye. She said, well, his brother died. I said, what's his name? She gave me the name of the brother. And he was pounding on the desk. I want to talk to my brother. I started pounding with him. I said, you love your brother, don't you? And I named the brother, and I said, he loves you. The pounding stopped. He calmed down. He went back to his room. I protected him. I loved him. That's all you have to do.
Okay, there's just a few more technologies that I want to touch on. Technology, supplements. Talk about supplements. So what are some supplements we can use in our early years, in our 30s, in our 40s, 50s, or whatever, and ones that we can continue to use perhaps when we have dementia, if we have it?
Well, there's a book called Awakening from Dementia, or Alzheimer's. Actually, the title is Awakening from Alzheimer's. I used that book extensively in my first decade. A lot of good information. There's other things like selenium, which we no longer find in the soil. They actually give that to animals that we eat because there's no selenium, not enough in the soil. That's something everybody needs to put in their system. Super B complex is really good for any muscle, to keep your muscle in good shape. So the people have troubles walking when they get dementia and so on. But if they have good vitamins like that in them, there's also D3, which we noticed that was lacking during COVID. And I know we have a herbalist on our team, so that person would be the one you would ask. She's not here today. And the other thing is garlic oil, which really helps to maintain all your veins and arteries. And we know that vascular dementia is the second one after Alzheimer's. That's because veins and arteries are not working properly. So just garlic oil will coat everything in your system the vascular system so that it's like Teflon, nothing sticks together. So that's would be the basis for me, the foundation, I would say. But Awakening from Alzheimer's really gave us some good advice. It's still available. I have 2 copies of it that I will never part with. And like I said, there's other things. There's other supplements that are available as well that helps the brain, helps you to keep you younger. We just signed up with Resilient because it's a peak performance supplement, nutritional supplement, and you see results within hours. It guarantees a couple of bowel movements a day, which are effortless. And we know older people in long-term care that are always sitting down or laying down, they have problems like that. That takes care of that. No more constipation. Sleep is better, which is really a problem with people that are getting older. And in nursing homes, a lot of noises, a new strange environment, and other benefits with just Resilient, which deals with mitochondria. And I would like Ryan to take over. Ryan, I think you have a message.
Yes, I just had a very brief point to echo what Dr. Lord was saying about one supplement in particular called Resilient. In this, on my side, I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I enjoy reading, peer-reviewed articles and really diving into the details a little bit. There's one of them that I think no matter who you are, what walk of life you come from, I think everybody should have access to this particular review. It's called The Hallmarks of Aging. The reason why I'm highlighting that review in particular is, and this is getting to the value of Resilient, is one of the observed realities that occurs on the cellular level is mitochondrial dysfunction, and that just comes secondary to age. But when that starts to happen, the mitochondria's physical integrity starts to break down, which means that your cells are unable to produce the same amount of ATP at the levels and at the rate that they were doing at previous time points in your life. So what Resilient is specifically designed to do is it's designed to maintain the physical integrity and the physiological integrity of the mitochondria. So it's supposed to prevent it from breaking down, which enables the mitochondria to actually work at 100% or as close to 100% efficiency when you're in those older ages. So that in turn gives you all that extra energy. It gives you a calm sense of energy, not like the Red Bulls or the Monster Energy drinks, which kind of give you that jittery energy and then a steep crash after you're done with those. So Resilient truthfully is a breakthrough, and it's something that people should consider, in my personal opinion, over the age of 55. But even me as a 35-year-old and an athlete, I should consider using it. I've tried it just recently this past week, Dr. Lord, and it's actually a pretty clear, relaxed, energetic experience.
Yes.
What's in it? What's in it?
It's a non-stimulant proprietary blend that was created by a doctor out of Cornell. Her name is Dr. Hazel Zetto. And she has not only taught medicine, but she also worked behind the bench, and she has over 60 patents. So her specialty is the mitochondria, and that's really all I feel at liberty to discuss at this point, just to kind of keep the proprietary secrets where they are.
Yeah. It's like I just got my first sponsored ad.
Yeah.
Just kidding. The unsponsored ad.
It was designed specifically for her needs and her family needs, and people in her family and close circles have all experienced benefit from it. So at this point, they're starting to scale up and pass it around to other people who want to experience. It's not currently FDA approved. So they are going through the proper channels in order to get that approval, but that type of stuff takes time. So just wanted to put that out there as well. It is a quality product in my opinion, but there's still some future testing, depending on who you are.
We're going to do our own research as well
the
ICA using that product. It's my son is 50 years old and he uses it for anxiety. He was smoking pot and drinking to reduce his anxiety, and I told him to stop. And
bad boy.
Within 2 days, no, he called me, and I'll tell you, we have great conversations. He's relaxed. He stopped drinking completely. I don't know about the smoking pot. Because
you sound like my mom. What are you guys doing in there? I'll knock the door. I feel eager to get a few more of these tools out there, but to to finish off on supplements, one thing I've that we hear of when it comes to all of this is alpha GPC and other supplements that basically increase acetylcholine or tap into the cholinergic system, which is a large part of what's going wrong in dementia. There's sort of a acetylcholine issue. A lot of those neurons are the ones that seem to be dying more than the others. What are your thoughts on alpha GPC, or does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, this could be a pharmacology lecture or it could be a little bit more generic. There are other diseases like Parkinson's disease where the pathophysiology is a little bit better understood. You get destruction of a very specific region of the brain that causes loss of dopamine production. And it seems if you can just give somebody that orally, it does quite a good benefit to improving the progression of the disease for some time. And we know that just flooding the body with this chemical is not targeted, but we don't have a better way to target it to specific pathways physically inside of the brain. And so if we're talking about dementia, this is very similar. We have a neurotransmitter essentially that seems to be depleted, but it's depleted in specific ways, specific neural pathways, and just as far as I know, it's not as convincing that simply taking oral dose of it works as effectively as the equivalent to Parkinson's. And likewise, I don't think the pathophysiology is quite as clear cut too. So it's probably not so surprising to say, if we don't really understand the pathophysiology, is it that surprising that it doesn't work as well? Meaning, I don't know, down the road, will we have, and this gets into active research both in academia and industry, startup companies, will we have targeted medication therapies, targeted delivery vectors for medications? I think someday this is going to come, but it's not in the immediate future. So, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see it as being a big game changer right this moment, but that's more my opinion.
Dr. Stelter, earlier you mentioned about sensory-based tools, and you mentioned the aromatherapy, specifically using scents like lavender. What are some of these other sensory-based tools that you love?
Yeah, so, we definitely promote aromatherapy, to its finest because there are a number of essential oils that have been shown in clinical research to be effective for various targeted intentions with the disease process. So, for example, citrus essential oil has been shown to increase appetite and improve mood. And so if you are working with or caring for an individual who is struggling with their diet or with eating, appetite loss is a common symptom with the disease process. Then using a citrus essential oil is very intentional in trying to increase their appetite, right? When we go back to the psychopharmacology discussion, right? It's oftentimes the doctor, which they do what they know how to do is they prescribe, right? So they will prescribe Remeron, usually to increase appetite, which is an antidepressant, right? So Remeron versus citrus essential oil, right? So you have lots of side effects, no side effects, right? So there's that, debate as well as to which one do you want to trial. I always recommend trial the non-pharmacological approach first. If it doesn't work, then go to pharmacology, right? So that's aromatherapy can be used in so many facets of the caregiving process, from helping with sleep to diet to motivation to mood, right? There's so many ways we can use essential oils. Other types of sensory-based tools that we have to consider is really also visually, right? I can get into music and all those kinds of things too, but that again could be another hour podcast. But visually, we have to understand what they're seeing. And when we look at some of the research collectively, if you bring it together, let's just say like in a dining process, right? There's been research that looked at, the color red actually increases appetite and yellow sustains attention. And that's why McDonald's is a multi-billion-dollar business. We've all been duped for so many years of why we love McDonald's, right? Because of the yellow and red. And so, it's simple, just swapping out that typical white or cream plate that we might serve our food on to serving it on a red plate can help increase consumption simply doing it that, in that way. But then you add in some of these other tools like then diffuse, citrus essential oil on top of that, and you can increase the consumption percentage even more than that, right? So it's these certain kinds of tools that you can incorporate. I'll mention music because that has been studied extensively, where you play music of their era that they enjoy. And it's, music that they grew up with when they were in their teens and 20s, right? This is music that can resonate to them. But you have to understand what music made them motivated, made them excited, made them happy, what music made them sad, made them depressed, right? We have to understand that because we want to make sure we're playing music that's going to influence them in positive ways. There's a great organization called Music and Memory. They've done a lot of research into how it can influence people living with dementia and can be a great resource as well. So you think about, you go through every aspect of our senses and say, okay, what does this person like to see and hear and taste and touch and smell? Bring that into the caregiving process, and that is your toolbox in and of itself.
Yeah, when you mentioned the visual tools, I saw Harrison's eyes light up. Talk about VR and AR as potential tools for all of this.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone's actually had a chance to use like a virtual reality headset.
I did.
I think that's a big starting point. And yeah, even talking about that technology, if people have not experienced it before, and then you get into augmented, enhanced, mixed reality, all those things.
People are tuning out. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's what I would say. It's really quite extraordinary, in my opinion. You really can reproduce either taking someone back to an environment that they're not able to physically access, even the idea of tourism, but applied to an elderly population to places maybe they've never been before. So the deeper questions here too are: can this do anything again to help put someone back into a long-term better state of mind, other than just the experience with a headset? I don't know if anyone has great answers to those questions, and the same thing, could it improve cognition or help maintain cognition in the long term? I mean, those are hopes, but I don't know that anyone's shown anything like that. So,
Okay, so I did some work with somebody one time who had a stroke. And I was using some of that technology with them. It did not work because it depends on the part of the brain that it actually worsened the condition. You can worsen the condition or really throw them into a spin. So it's important if the parts are not functioning and you're throwing information, or like an exercise was ping pong, you literally could feel the ping pong, the ball hitting the right and the left and coming back and forth in a healthy brain. But somebody that has some dysfunction, has dementia or Parkinson or something, you might get some problems. But
Might make things worse.
Yeah, make it worse.
Ryan, I think Ryan, you wanted to say something more about the sensory-based tools, or maybe you forgot, but I feel like I almost interrupted you a minute ago.
Yeah, just really quickly. So one of the relationships that I have at OPP NeuroSpa is a company called Pragma Systems USA. They're a global group, but what they have is a harness system that revolutionizes physical therapy. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is what they've done is they've paired AR and VR to that particular system, and they've created entertainment for the bedridden population. So I know for me personally, I love video games. I'm not one of those people that abuse, and sit in front of the TV screen for 24 hours looking at an artificial light source per day. But I love video games. So I can imagine that if I was 60 or 70 and I got to the point where I was required to be in sort of a care facility, that I would want the ability to be able to go walk in and do my physical therapy while I'm walking up Mount Kilimanjaro, or, walking through the Alps, or making an experience where I'm walking through, Buckingham Palace Gardens, something along those lines. So for me, the VR and the AR necessarily isn't trying to medically treat the disease and improve. I mean, maybe there are some really cool research in there that I haven't, seen in that direction. But for me, it's more so motivating the person to partake in exercise, get up and move, and use the healthy elements of VR and AR to improve their life quality.
And the other senses are still accessible at the time, right? Like you can still combine this with aromatherapy, with um, healthy touch, etc. I mean, you don't want to overload their system, but there are combinations and things that are possible. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one of our major partners is NeuroTracker, which is really the global leader in, and Ryan could give a much more scientific description of this. We haven't talked much about, what could happen remedially, what could actually improve someone's cognitive skill levels and so forth. And in fact, there is some evidence from NeuroTracker that really you can improve people's, let's say, I think they call it perceptual cognitive training improves motor skills and aging. Ryan, are you feel comfortable speaking on behalf of NeuroTracker there? But actually, there is a training effect that can actually improve cognitive skill levels. Does that match with your understanding?
So I don't really feel too comfortable at the moment speaking in too much detail. The goal there with NeuroTracker is to assess individualized performance, and then once you have an understanding of individualized performance, figure out what needs to be done to improve the cognitive patterns of that individual so that they can perform at their best when they're out and about in everyday society. So the one thing that I can definitely say about NeuroTracker is when you're talking about Manchester United or professional sporting teams, and you're talking about peak performance of athletes, NeuroTracker is the go-to technology that I'm at least aware of globally. Where we partnered with them and we're really interested to assist them is we need to refine some of the cognitive testing tools that they currently use because it's not necessarily designed specific for the dementia world. So we've partnered with them to start to test the waters a little bit to see what can be done to innovate a new solution specific for the geriatric and dementia community.
Yes, that's a very interesting research that we're going to be starting. And that all leads to the level of engagement. That's why I'm interested.
This
Well,
is a
they say
couple
they're
more
in the
tools.
business. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Um,
But
I'm like maybe I got OCD or something. I'm like, I gotta check off my list. I want to ask this. I want to ask this. It's gonna bother me if I don't ask a couple more things. And like, there are 1,000 things I'm not gonna be able to ask. I'm gonna have to have you guys come on, maybe individually or again as a team. Again and again. This is too much in here. And we're going for 2 hours. I think this is my world record longest podcast. Thank you for extending it. I hope I'm not abusing you. Traumatizing you or whatever. This is great for me. Anyway, tools. I know it's not legal everywhere, but it is sort of one of these things being researched. Psychedelics.
I'll speak first because I don't see enough evidence for myself. They're already, dementia already throws you into a new basket of living and everything else, changes everything. So, but if somebody's in pain, like I just said, massive headaches, if it's something that's recommended and the family approves of that, the doctor is also approval. I'm not against that, but I wouldn't just do it because they have dementia. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't. I don't have enough evidence. Dr. Harrison, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little biased from my anesthesia background here, but again, what, if anything, can we compare this to? In the United States right now, there's quite a huge explosion. For years, anesthesia has used ketamine in the operating room. It has some uses in the emergency department, maybe the ICU, but the idea of using it outpatient, it's a dissociative drug. It's now being used for in low dose, slow infusions or intranasally or pill format for treatments from everything from depression to fibromyalgia, chronic pain. And it's become a very confusing matter right now in medicine, how to handle this. And as far as I've been following it, a lot of the clinical trials are finishing up right now on the psychedelics, psilocybin, even potentially LSD, acid. And so these are going to be approved at some point. And what use do they have? I mean, I think in the world of anesthesia, the answer is probably none. But that question of could they be used, and historically, back in the 1960s, 70s, a lot of psychiatrists thought they were used, and like psychologists who did deep psychotherapy thought they were useful adjuvants to psychotherapy. But those same questions are coming up. Can psychedelic medications, psychotropic medications, be used for pain, for depression?
Dementia.
Are they going to be useful in an elderly population? And so ketamine is a dissociative. These are hallucinogens. I'm really not convinced that they're going to be, I think they're going to be a lot of problems. What is a low dose hallucinogen going to look like or help? I'm skeptical. I have to say, it's going to get approved in my opinion soon, but I'm just skeptical that it's going to be useful for anything in a dementia population or frankly, just any population at all.
And to Dr. Harrison's point, we have to remember that, these are treating the symptoms of dementia, but they're not a cure for dementia. And I think that we have to make sure that our listeners understand that these are not solutions to the ultimate problem. These are just if the individual has pain, if the individual has depression, if the individual has anxiety, or if they have GI issues, that may come along, right? That's what these various types of tools are used for right now. So it's,
Right.
Get educated, work with people who know what they're doing.
Yeah. So we can't reverse dementia. There's no cure for dementia. These aren't tools for like, okay, we're going to bring you back to normal or even a little bit more normal. Maybe we can make their lives more bearable, reduce some of the symptoms. But yeah, these are not tools for curing or reversing any of this. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Now let's blast fully into the future, which is apparently now our favorite new trending topic, AI. I think it's Harrison. I see Harrison doing that one.
Yeah, I've developed machine learning systems at multiple institutes. Well, could you be slightly more specific?
I mean, like how can we use AI? I'm thinking wild things. For example, there's gene editing is another technology. Maybe we can combine gene editing with AI. This is going to get super freaky and dangerous, perhaps. Maybe we can get the data from, I don't know, blood pressure and heart rate and weird things, and the AI is like personalizing some weird little. I have no idea. I'm not the AI expert, but just how can we use AI to kind of help make people's lives easier with dementia? Yeah,
people are trying in healthcare to apply I might say machine learning, AI. I guess at this point they're kind of synonyms, but people are trying to decode complex patterns. And the very opening questions, too, that were asked about genetics, what is the complex pattern of dementia? Is how many types of dementia are there? Do they blend together? Can that all be decoded into a set of patterns? It's too complex for humans to do. That's the real value of artificial intelligence, is to map patterns that humans cannot see. And so that could be anything from blood-based data to a cognitive survey like you're talking about it. I mean, we could be talking Black Mirror style here. Anything you can think of could be fed into an AI system as data to try to identify a pattern. And so I mean, this is a big interest in all of human physiology right now. Are there patterns that we are failing to recognize? And are we failing to recognize some basic physiologic pattern in dementia that might have an intervention right now, but we don't see it? I'm not aware of anybody doing anything that cutting edge specifically with dementia. Pharmacogenetics that was talked about, that is a huge point. Humans are not good at trying to manually review the whole genome. So AI is a huge component now of trying to analyze pharmacogenomics data. I'm working with a company that's trying to use AI to also analyze EEG data for a different purpose than what Ryan was talking about. It's complex signal analysis, and I think that's the benefit of AI. Just to say too, what AI is not, it's not alive, it's not sentient, it's that sort of Terminator type stuff. I think we're not getting into that, but as a tool, could it be useful? Maybe it will down the road, anything from pharmacogenomics to potentially trying to find ways to. It's not good right now at like systems level care. You can't really feed modern AI systems very well a systems process and say optimize this process. It just doesn't handle those types of questions so well. They're not structured data, and I'll stop there. It gets very technical.
And where I see AI more helpful, like in a more, let's just say less intimidating way, is we start to see it as bringing information to the caregiver about the individual they're caring for. Now, for families, this may not necessarily be a useful tool, but for that caregiver who is, from that home care company, or that caregiver in that assisted living who maybe doesn't have a lot of information about the person that they're providing care for, and they want to know what are their preferences, what are their likes, right? So AI can potentially bring information to that person to say, this person grew up in this town and they liked they played this sport, and, they like these foods. These are things that then that individual as a caregiver can turn around and make them as tools to incorporate in the caregiving process. So just having information faster to the caregiver can help, I think, in that realm, as a more, less intimidating way to use AI in this perspective.
Yeah, it could tune into their favorite music and all their favorite foods and smells and ways of interacting, visuals maybe that you combine it with the virtual reality in this case. We can go on and on about all of this. But yeah, we're talking about all these futuristic things, but basically we have the best technology already available, the human body, the human nervous system, especially as social beings. So this dementia coach thing seems to be hitting, 80% of it. Forget about VR, AR, psychedelics, all this stuff. That's all great. It might open up new windows, but we have these human beings that can help heal each other through education, through just ways of interacting in a safe and social, connected way. Are there any other final thoughts on any of this? We're at the sort of 2-hour and 16-minute mark at this point. This is beautiful. But yeah, any other sort of final things you want to say, you were excited to say, and I just didn't give you the chance or whatever?
I'm going to open up a futurist discussion because that's what you asked for.
Yeah.
So prior to 2018, there was nowhere anywhere on the planet Earth that equated AI to human beings. However, there is one country in the world today that has a machine-based system that has equal citizenship to the human beings living within that country. Anybody know what robot I'm talking about, or what country has given AI equal citizenship to us humans?
Yes, I know, but I don't want to disclose because you told me.
Saudi Arabia in 2018 gave a robot called Robot Sophia equal citizenship to human beings. So the reason why I think that's fascinating as it pertains to AI is because when you think about all of the technologies that go into mimicking sentience, I don't think we're at the point where AI actually has established true sentience yet. But you think about all of those types of technologies that enable that, we're getting interestingly close to being able to replicate how another human being thinks and emotionally processes the world. So I definitely wanted to bring that topic up. Another topic of discussion I wanted to bring up is, have you guys heard of Project Norman or Project Shelley in particular? This is a little bit on the dark side of the coin, so I do apologize, but it's interesting.
Just a little bit on the dark side.
Shelley Frankenstein? What is this?
That's where it started from. So at MIT Laboratories, it's worth looking into Project Shelley and Project Norman. Project Shelley was all about creating horror story narratives that can scare an individual on a targeted basis. So that's what Project Shelley in a nutshell was all about. Project Norman is the very interesting project that happened a few months later, just down the hallway in a different laboratory at MIT. So most people, when they're making AI-based systems, they try to take a human characteristic like logic, and then they try to make a computer system develop hyperlogic that, is beyond human levels. So what this group did in particular was they created the first psychopathic AI with intents to enhance the knowledge that is out there of different mental health disorders. So when we're talking about all of these different technologies that are currently existing, There's a topic that for me is very interesting, and it's called micro-targeting in particular. We see this on social media all the time when you're a small business and you're actually trying to, micro-target your services to an audience. But what I'm talking about is actually micro-targeting an individual's digital self. So we're in this time period where you ask somebody, what makes you you? Traditionally, most of us have been taught the paradigms of mind, body, and soul. Most of us haven't been taught that there's this digital self that also exists. For me, I was born in 1989, so there's a lot more data that has been collected on me from the time that I was born, relative to, say, maybe Bill or Dr. Lord, who they were alive, when these systems were being innovated, and these data collection systems, were improving and refining themselves. So I just wanted to bring that into the discussion, because we are in a time period where our teenagers, in particular, they're uploading all of this information to social media. That means that there's different degrees of depth that we're learning about how people process the world. And when you bring the learning management system into that and micro-targeting, it becomes a very interesting discussion. And it is kind of dark, but it's unfortunate reality that, if you're a parent of kids in this day and age, you have to deal with social media.
Yeah, dude, pop that freaking Frankenstein Shelley AI into a robot or something, or weird clone. Dude, we're gonna build real ass Frankensteins, and maybe loving versions of that too, based off the data that has been collected our entire life, because we were born in 2005 or 2010 or something, or 2020. You can recreate this human being in a robot or in a freaking biological factory-made biological thingy. We're getting a little off topic here. This is fun. Yeah, Dr. Lord, I think you had a comment there.
Yes, I wanted to give Pat a chance to speak about that same topic, because he has something very valuable to share to do with his work and robots.
Well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot in this, but we've been toying with the same model that we use to assess an individual's personality. We've basically been feeding that into large language models as well, and teaching the bots, the AI, to adapt its language. So we're basically working with models of emotionally resonant language specific to the individual. And there's a number of ways in which this can be used. Yes, there's a major ethical issue here, because you can get on the wavelength of that individual very, very quickly. So the individual spends 90 seconds telling us about who they are, and from that we know precisely where their focus goes, what values are driving their decisions, and so we can then extrapolate from that a whole series of phrases that they would respond to, ones they would be drawn towards, ones that they would avoid, and so you can basically say the same thing in 100 million different ways based upon the individual's personality, and so we can capture that and very instantly turn the same thing around. So if we're coaching a CEO to speak to the organization, the whole organization can be or the team can be profiled, and then basically say to the CEO, okay, so go with this first, and then this, and then this, and then this. That's not your style, but that's the style that will fit the audience you're dealing with. But that's kind of generalizing, which can be useful, but when you're dealing with these bots, you can individualize those messages in a very, very specific way. Now, can I give you two scenarios then? One, that helps you to gain rapport very, very quickly with an individual, even if you're talking to an Alexa or a Siri or whatever. So that can be an amazing companion for somebody. To be able to speak their mind, and they reflect back, and you feel like there's a connection. It's simulation, but it's a simulated companionship on your level. So it's an extraordinary comfort for people who've got no one else to talk to. But also, you can then program this thing, if you want it to be your coach, you can amp up those little bits of the personality that you need to react to, because we respond to character as probably more than anything else. If you want somebody to pull you up as a coach, you need them to be a few steps ahead of you, or at least as a mentor or as a personal trainer. And so you can basically get them to use a little bit more of the language that you need to grow into in order to be like an avuncular figure or a teacher or a mentor, to pull you up to that by speaking that way to you. And you can bridge that gap, and you can stretch your personality in a sense to grow into those spaces. So there's some possibilities there, and it's a lot of fun. It's based on exactly the same model of personality.
The biggest problem in family caregiving, is isolation. I remember one time asking Google, "Hey, Google, do you love me?" And Google says, "I can't say I love you, but I like you." And that was enough to get me to the next thing I had to do. At least I heard a voice that was sympathetic with me, answered me, because my husband couldn't talk. It was wonderful. So there's some use for that for caregiving. Bill, what did you?
Just bringing it back full circle to the dementia care world, it makes you wonder, with all the tools that Pat was referencing and Ryan, in terms of capturing someone's emotional tenor, their thought patterns, everything or many of the things that we associate with defining someone's personality, if people could start capturing that, pre-dementia, and memories and that sort of thing, I wonder if there could be some aspect of that at least for their family would be something that would be keep their alive, keep their digital self, because it is becoming so robust and so highly nuanced that, the challenge ahead for us is to know when we see someone speaking and doing something, is that really them speaking and doing it, right? We saw this whole thing happen with Taylor Swift and, in all of the artificially created selves that are out there. But I think it's interesting that you could really encapsulate someone's manner of thinking, not their what I would consider their eternal, soul or spirit, but you can really, you can tell AI, and I do a lot of writing, you can tell AI to sound exactly like Winston Churchill. I mean, even if it's just talking about Mary Had a Little Lamb, write it the way Winston Churchill would write it. Boom, you got it. So that's going to be interesting in terms of what happens when you have loss of personality on the protoplasmic level. Can you keep it somehow, and can it be a blessing to the people with dementia or those around them? Just trying to bring it back full circle to dementia care.
Yeah, dude, I had no idea how techie, futuristic you guys were. I hear about dementia care, International Caregivers Association. It sounds like the most boring, non-techie, just classic human to human kind of organization. But wow, this is what a pleasant surprise that you guys are jumping fully onto AI, data, all that kind of stuff. This is amazing. This is great. I did not expect this.
We have these talks every time after we have a meeting. We'll often go extra innings, and really we should have a show of just blue sky, what's over the horizon, because I'll tell you, this group has got their finger on the pulse, and it's fascinating because different people bring in different pieces, and you can actually begin to piece things together that are mind-blowing.
Yeah, Bill, you also mentioned about capturing these memories of the person. Yeah, we take pictures, but we need more than pictures. What flashed into my head when you said that was earlier on, I don't know, last summer, I did a podcast episode with my brother. My brother is suffering with, well, I don't know. He has a bipolar disorder, and he's been homeless for the past 2 years. Luckily, I was able to catch him when he had a phone and when he had Wi-Fi. And we had a conversation for a couple hours, and I haven't heard from him in the past 6 months or something, so I hope he's okay. But I'm glad I have that voice recording of him, so I could always hear his voice. Just one conversation.
Yes.
I wish I did it with my mom before she died. That would have been just having one video of audio recording of that person. Duncan Trussell, the podcaster, he captured his mother's voice as she was dying with cancer, and he had a couple of podcast interviews with her, and then they were able to partner with Netflix and turn that into an anime series with his mom sort of eternalized as this character in the Midnight Gospel. I'm so grateful I had this one 2-hour recording of me and my brother. I hear his voice is there. The more you have these voices, and if you could get more and more of it and feed it all together, just hearing that voice of that person is really beautiful. I know, Dr. Lord, you mentioned this in your book too, recording the audio. But yeah, if we can combine this with AI and stuff too, and
Yes.
because these people do change, they're still there, but as the dementia goes on, or as they die, or my deepest fear is my brother's just never coming back, but at least his voice is there. He will come back. My mom won't. People won't. So this is not just about dementia. It's about death. It's about loss in general. So getting that data can be healing for all the people involved. You talk about the team and the family and all these people involved in it. It's not just the person with dementia, but it's the brothers and sisters and fathers and friends and all that. So yeah, this data collection is a really important thing. It's hard to just let go and never hear from the person ever again, or never be able to even, it might be through imagination, but the imagination is better than nothing sometimes, at least in certain periods of the grieving process. Yeah.
Yes.
And Michael, one of the aspects of AI is the predictive aspect of it, right? So they can look at all the historical.
Oh, we're getting an echo.
Yeah.
We're getting an echo.
Yeah, Bill, you're speaking of sci-fi. You're sounding really sci-fi right now, Bill. It's your audio, not your content. Yeah,
Michael, my mother-in-law often called, and I had kept a message on my phone. And my two sisters-in-laws, the thing they expressed to me years after she passed away, if I could only hear my mother's voice, I said, let me give that to you now. And there's the most precious gift I could give them. Yeah.
So what if you could predict where someone might go if they wander from a senior living community? Just thinking out loud, or how they would say happy birthday to you 5 years after they're gone, based upon the algorithms of how they spoke and what they thought. I mean, that whole predictive analysis aspect of it, where you can actually say, what would they probably do? How would they have said this? That could be very interesting. But I think we've all touched on a nerve here that the recollections of people's voice is very deep and really resonates and really emotional for people.
I know of technology right now and programs that do that, Bill. They'll go back on your phone, even if you didn't save that message, and recover that message for you. And they and that's all people want to hear is that voice. What could I hear that voice again? I have the voice of my husband, and all he says is, "Hey, Atal," and then he starts speaking. And the minute he says, "Hey, Atal," he's with me.
He's gotcha. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. Michael, see what you started? I think you need to join ICA and be in a part of our regular brainstorms.
Oh, I'd love to play a role in that for sure. Yeah, this is a beautiful thing about podcasting it too, or just doing events, connecting with other humans, even if it's through LinkedIn or Meetup or whatever. Is all these kinds of new possibilities evolve and open up when you just say hi to another person, and it's a chain effect. So yeah, like you're providing also that you're bringing these people into these dementia care facilities, or they're not even dementia care facilities, or healthcare facilities, and people have dementia there, I'm guessing. But that opens up possibilities for that individual. Yeah, this is great, and I would love to get more involved. Yeah, we are going on and on about this, but what do you expect when you have 6 people, 7 people in the call, and tens of millions of people with the issue, and it's just like this is like dementia, ICA. This is something that just can go on
forever,
for centuries. This conversation, forever.
One thing I want to mention, Michael, we didn't mention that, but you talked about dementia facilities, but actually they're called dementia units. And to me, they're like prisons. Under our system, our licensure, the door comes off. These people are allowed to walk around, to be free. That's very, very important. Just like the person working 6 hours being paid 8 hours, we open the door to those units.
Yeah, some of them are secure and locked down, so you have to understand how that creates a kind of tension and emotional pressure in the lives of these people. So again, I think in 10 years, we're going to look back at where it's been.
Crazy.
We're going to say, my God, how did we ever think that was a humane way to deal with people that frail and that vulnerable? But that's changing, but you have to go against the grain. There's a very strong embedded kind of culture. And we're just out there, each of us on our own kind of bulldozer, just trying to gently help people understand that there's a better way to do things.
Yeah, and I think too, with Bill, to your point, it's the same trajectory as mental illness, right? It's like decades ago, if someone had a mental illness, they were in a straitjacket in a psych institution, right? And now, individuals with mental illness can live every day like you and I, with, proper treatment and, consistency of care and things like that. And so I think dementia care, we're going to see this evolution. We already have, I think, through research and innovative technology. But I think, to your point, Bill, 10, 20 years down the road, we're going to see much more focus on that, individuals' independence and freedom and things like that.
Thank God.
All right, I'm gonna close this off in a second, but after we say goodbye, just make sure to stay online for a minute or so to make sure all the files get uploaded. I don't want to lose this one. Maybe I don't get a chance to talk to you guys again. This is my only recording of it. This beautiful conversation and relationship. Yeah. How can people connect with you? Get involved with the ICA or any? Just toss out whatever resources that you have.
Bill?
I think the best direction we could give anybody is to go to the website.
Classic.
ICAcares.com, ICAcares.com. Go to the contact page for all the contact info. A lot of resources, a ton of resources out there, and more on the way. So we hope it will become a major set of resources for people, both at the family level and at the organizational level. And they can find a lot of ways to get involved, including membership, and we hope they do.
I love books and things, videos, courses, all kinds of stuff like that. ICA aside, just in general, what are some of your recommended resources for people who want to learn more about dementia and dementia care?
Well, both Dr. Stelter and I have a good book. Dr. Stelter, would you please tell us about your book?
Absolutely. I'll also put a link in the chat. So it's called The Busy Caregiver's Guide to Advanced Alzheimer's Disease. It was published by Johns Hopkins in 2021, and it dives further into the dementia connection model, which I mentioned a couple of times, and this kind of sensory-based approach and filling your toolbox with all these sensory tools that's individualized to the person. And then it walks you through each aspect of care and how do you apply this non-pharmacological framework to each aspect. So ADL care and communication and managing challenging behavioral expressions, all from using your hands and your heart. And so it can be found anywhere you buy books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Johns Hopkins website, but I'll put the link in the chat box as well.
Yes. My book is Alzheimer's Coaching. I'm on my third edition.
I think you come what Bill has.
Say that again?
Your audio is all echoey like Bill's. Sorry,
Yes,
Bill, I'm not trying to turn you into the echo guy. Now you're forever framed as the guy who echoes. No. Hopefully people even listened in this long 2.5 hours. Whoa. Yeah, your book.
Yeah, I'm on my third edition, but the second edition of Alzheimer's Coaching is available upon request at the ICA.com, ICAcares.com, and it's free of charge. The second edition.
Okay. The
third edition will be up in a month or so, and that there will be a cost for that.
Great. Anything final to add, or? Yes,
I have a series of primers called "How in the World and Now What Do I Do" in French, English, in Arabic, and also in Spanish. That's also free of charge for asking, and it's just the basic symptoms of dementia, when it starts, what tests you should be asking for, things like that, just for somebody that's just brand new, just a new diagnosis. they want to know more. Again, it's available at ICAcares.com.
I will thank you, everyone. This is wonderful. I've been trying to dig into all this dementia stuff this past week. I'm like, oh God, how far behind am I on this? And I caught up to a decent pace, but then you just blasted me further into it all with all of this. And I was kind of scared to, worried to jump on this thing because you're like, you got freaking half a dozen people. That's something new for me. Apparently it's live. People might be listening. I think they are. But this is a great challenge for me. And that's another thing about dementia too, is and staving off dementia is keep challenging ourselves physically and cognitively and pushing ourselves a little bit each day. And that's going to help keep those neurons healthy and keep our body healthy as well. So yeah, this was a sort of a neuroplastic event for me, and I got through it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to each one of you. I feel like I want to continue this. So thank you so much, and looking forward to what comes next.
Thank you.